Good afternoon, everyone. I will now call this Inter-Township Joint Board of Management meeting to order, July 11th, 2023 at 2 p.m. We will start with the land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. We will move on to approval of the agenda, starting with, are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, the recommendation is that the agenda be approved as presented. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Are we members or counselors here? Members. Member Bartley and Member Keaveney. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, you may declare at any time throughout the meeting if one should arise. Minutes of the previous meetings, May 16th, 2023. Recommendation that the minutes of the May 16th, 2023 Inter-Township Joint Board of Management meeting be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Member Winters. I'll get this straight someday. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? Delegations. Sorry, I'm reading this here. Items not on the agenda is 6.2.1, 2022 audit final report. Okay. So the recommendation is that the draft audited 2022 financial statements as presented by BDO be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Keaveney, Member Winters. Tracy, welcome. Oh, give us a minute to get the podium back in place. Thank you for being here today, Tracy, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I think I'm on. Am I on?
You are.
I'm on. Okay. I think they're just going to bring up the presentation, but I would like to thank the board for having me here this afternoon. I'd also like to thank Samantha and her team for getting the information together for us to prepare the audit. The report that's going to come up shortly is it contains all the required communications under auditing standards for the board. It is very similar year to year, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through every page of that report. On page 3 of the report is the executive summary. Just some highlights from the executive summary. The financial statements are in draft. You've started a motion there to approve the financial statements. Once the financial statements are approved by the board, then we can issue our final report. We do declare every year that BDO is independent of the board and able to express an opinion on the financial statements. Materiality was $27,000. There were no internal control issues that came to our attention that needed to be disclosed to the board. Unadjusted differences are on page 10, and again, they're very small, just a one timing issue with payables, so it's not material. We can issue an audit opinion that the financial statements are not materially misstated. And our opinion is on page 2 of the financial statements, which you will find in Appendix A. Well, maybe just give a minute so that we can actually bring up the actual financial statements. Any questions on the report or the audit before we get into the financial statements? If you have any questions, feel free to ask at any time. You can scroll through into the appendixes. Go back up one page is our auditors. One more page. There we go. Okay. So you do have the financial statements on the screen there now. And our opinion is in the second paragraph. In our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Township Fire Department at December 31st, 2022, in accordance with public sector accounting standards, which means it was a clean opinion and there was no issues that arose during the audit. On page 4, you'll find the balance sheet of the Township Fire Department. So again, the most significant change, and I'm sure that you are aware of, in 2022, you purchased the new fire truck. So that impacted a few things that are on your balance sheet. Of course, it impacted the capital assets. So you'll see a significant increase in your tangible capital assets for that new purchase of the fire truck. The other thing that the purchase of the fire truck impacted was the receivable from the member municipalities, Georgia Bluff and Meaford. So you had passed a motion with that fire truck to finance most of that from your future capital reserves, which the individual municipalities both had held separately. And so then you'll notice that there's a significant decrease in each of your receivables in the future capital line, and you'll see an increase in the receivables that's due from the municipality for current purposes. So since the money was spent, then the funds now need to come into the Township Fire Department to pay for the fire truck. And so the other item that impacted was your reserves. So your reserves have now been significantly reduced, and you will find the reserves are in note 3. The reserves went from 1.2 million down to $738,000. And so those are on your balance sheet. They're included in the accumulated surplus note at the bottom there of the 2.5. So that 2.5 million in accumulated surplus, that includes the capital assets, which have now increased to 1.9, your capital reserves, the remaining capital reserves of 738,000, your working capital reserve of 150,000, and an accumulated deficit of 225,888. On page 5 is the transactions for the year. And the revenues include both the capital and operating, but it does not include the transfers from reserves. So you don't see that huge increase in your revenue because the financing for the truck came from the reserves. The expenses also do not include your capital expenses or the debt payments, so you don't see the truck there because it is all flowing through on the balance sheet. So I just want to highlight that. So the annual deficit that you see on this page, the annual deficit of 69,051, although it is close to what your actual operating deficit was for the year, the amount, the annual surplus on this page doesn't include the capital items. So I want to just maybe direct you to Appendix D because I did provide a separated schedule of the operating revenues and expenses in Appendix D. So in Appendix D, you'll see the operating revenues were 885,000. The operating expenses were 966,000. So the operating deficit for the current year was 80,658. You'll see that there's 3 years of history there, 2020, 2021, and 2022. In each of those years, you did have an operating deficit. So those 3 operating deficits have accumulated and now sit at $225,000. So that is something that the board will need to address in your future budgeting to deal with those operating deficits. You will see in about the middle of the page there, I've separated the capital revenues and the capital expenses. So the capital expenses for the year totaled 745,601 in the middle, and 629,000 of that came from your capital reserves. So in the current year, you financed your current year financing for capital was consistent with your prior year amounts of 144,000. All right. So again, those are just some highlights. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to. I just wanted to focus on the kind of the main things that changed.
Sorry. Any questions from anyone on the board? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Carlton. And more so a question, I guess, for staff. On page 5, I see that the expenses in 2022, the actual, all but except for 2 smaller ones, are considerably higher than the budget. So I'm just wondering, do we see that as a trend, recognizing COVID and supply chain issues and so on? Do we think that's a trend, and do we think that we've got that adequately covered in the budget for 2023?
Sorry, through your mayor, which items are you looking at?
I'm looking at the expenses, yeah, right where you are there, the actual as compared to budget.
Yes, so a large portion of that was because of the changes within the volunteer requirements that we believe we have fully reflected for 2023, that we shouldn't experience that again. The other was related to vehicles, and unfortunately, I do not have a direct answer for that, but I can look into and provide further comments to the board. But I do believe our 2023 budget is reflective of what we will be spending within 2023.
So through you, Mayor Carlton,
Go ahead.
that may actually be fuel that's driven up the vehicle pricing there. Would have to double check, but that could be fuel.
What are the changes in the volunteer that you're referring to there?
So through your chair to chair, it is the new requirements that volunteers are required to in the phased-in approach. So we did attempt to successfully accomplish some of those within 2022. So that is what drove up kind of volunteer costs and wages for the training.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Chair Carl. And if you remember, because we knew that cost was coming, we reduced our capital draw from the 2 municipalities to make it work out. You remember that last fall?
Okay, if there are no other questions of Tracy, then I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And thanks very much, Tracy, for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, on no correspondence, on to staff reports. 8.1.1 ITFD 2023-06 surplus truck 6. the recommendation that the Intertownship Fire Department Joint Board of Management declares the 1993 pump truck, Truck 6, as surplus pursuant to policy FIN 003-10, disposal of surplus equipment, and that staff be directed to offer first opportunity of purchase to each participating municipality, and if neither municipality wishes to purchase, staff be directed to list the truck for sale on Gov Deals. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Bartley, Member Winters, is there any discussion? Go ahead, Member Keaveney.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. I'm just curious to know if we have any idea of the value of truck number 6.
At this time, no research. They fluctuate so much through Gov Deals when I was researching, and so at this time, I would really no concrete prices.
Member Winters, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to Jeff. At one point in time, Gov Deals used to have a separate, call it internal auction that they offered to municipalities without going to the public. When I read this last night, I mean, I had two questions. One is, what is the value of that truck? If each municipality was offered it, somebody threw out a lowball offer, is that fair? Is that representative? Is it a better thing to look at Gov Deals as the internal, where they offer it to local municipalities first before it goes public? Then it's not just the two municipalities that have the opportunity, and it's fair and open, transparent, but it also opens up to other municipalities. I mean, fire trucks have very limited use outside of the fire service, so they don't bring great values, but it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, through your chair, I can reach out to Gov Deals and see the different processes they have, but I know they have, like you say, it's an internal auction. And if they can restrict it to municipalities, I will research and I'll get that answer.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. And it's just a small change, but just a correction on page 48. It's suggested to list in the Meaford Express, which we no longer have our newspapers, the Meaford Independent.
Anything further? Okay. Do we need to amend the motion now to reflect that change?
Through your chair, Carlton, I would recommend that if we are striking that direction for the first opportunity to purchase, that we do an amendment to the motion. If you no longer wish to include that and wish for it to go to Gov Deals as mentioned by Member Winters, then I would suggest an amendment to the motion, because it does also include that first opportunity in the second paragraph.
Okay, any comments from board? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. Seeing our chief is in the audience, would our chief have any interest in buying this truck?
At this time, our fire hall is full with exceptional vehicles, and we've been very lucky with what the Meaford Council has provided with us. At this time, we do not see a need or a place to be able to store it if we did.
Thank you. You must have really good counselors.
You have no idea.
Having said that, I have no issue taking that first portion off the record.
Member Winters, go ahead.
And I'm okay with that. I just think when we leave here tonight, we have to give clear direction. Is it putting it for sale on Gov Deals? Are we coming back with an amended report and more information? I just think we need to keep it moving. And I'm okay with going directly to Gov Deals as well. Again, there's limited use for fire trucks. Get it out there as soon as you can. Time is money.
Through your chair, the reason we did it this way is because some municipalities purchase their works departments purchase these vehicles for bridge washing and different things like that. So that's why we kind of reached out that way in case there's a non-fire use for it. So that's one of the reasons we did that.
So I'm going to go to Acting CAO Lovely. And is that something that Georgian Bluffs wants to consider there? Or we want to just move this one along? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I believe that the board should act in the best interest of the board, and probably not in the best interest of the municipality, of which the board is, I don't know, is the answer to this one. So I am not sure that it is in the board's interest, if the municipality had an interest in this vehicle, for us to say that the municipality should have first right of refusal at a low cost, reflecting Councillor Winter's comment. We would still have opportunity to bid on this on Gov Deals if we deemed it necessary. At this point in time, we have not identified this in our budget or in our capital forecast as something that we would want. So it would have to then come back to the municipality council meeting for discussion. But I suspect that reflecting Councillor Winter's, Member Winter's points, Gov Deals wouldn't exclude us from being able to purchase it.
Thank you for the answer.
I hope that was right.
Okay, so we are amending that to, how do you want that worded then? We're taking out the part about each participating municipality and it's just going straight to Gov Deals?
Through you, Chair, yes, I struck out staff be directed to offer first opportunity. The second paragraph now says that staff be directed to list the truck for sale on Gov Deals.
Okay. So can I have a mover and seconder for the amendment, please? Member Pringle, Member Bartley? If there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote there. All in favor? That is carried. So then we're back to the main motion as amended, and I will call the vote on that one then. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we're on to 8.1.2, the ITFD 2023-07 Quarter 2 Emergency Response Breakdown. Recommendation is that the Intertownship Board of Management receive the report ITFD 2023-07 for information. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Keaveney, Member Winters. And are there any comments from staff on that report at all?
Through your chair, at this time, we see our numbers going up. We're up a few calls again this month, so our trend as in 2023 is the call volume going up. I think we're up like overall about 15 calls this year from last year at this time, and this month starting out quite busy as well. So our numbers are trending upwards.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we are moving on to 8.2 Treasury Department. So 8.2.1 FIN 2023-15 Intertownship Fire Department Agreement. Recommendation is that the Intertownship Joint Board of Management receive report FIN 2023-15 for information, and that the board direct staff to provide any/all comments of the board to the participating municipalities for consideration, and that the board endorse the draft agreement for the establishment and operation of a joint municipal service board for the joint management and operations of the Intertownship Fire Department. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Keaveney? Member Pringle? Is there any discussion? Member Winters, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I've got several concerns, and when I read this last night, I mean, I missed last week's council meeting at Georgian Bluff, so I don't know how much debate and conversation was had there, but it seems alarming to me that both councils saw this before the board saw it. But not kind of an alarming situation. I think this should be something that the board started with as a draft before it went back to the councils. I look at changing the whole structure of the board with bringing members of the public in. Not sure what the rationalization is behind that. I look at the board meeting quarterly instead of monthly or bi-monthly. That's a bit of an alarm. And the 3% given to the fire department yearly as a goal to set their budgets, and if it comes in at 3 or less, council just rolls over and approves that. It doesn't sit well with me. Yeah, I've got a lot of issues with this, but I'd be interested in everybody else's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments elsewhere? Go to Member Bartley and then Member Keating.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. Actually, Member Winters, our council were very happy with this agreement. We were quite pleased with getting members of the public on, one from each, which would be, I think, assist us well. I know in the past we've canceled a lot of meetings because there was not enough material to talk about, but it does say in this agreement that if you do need more meetings, you can add them at any time and call them at any time. The 3% scares me also. That kind of gives them an open, now we can go 3%. That kind of scares me a little bit, but overall, I was very pleased with the new agreement.
Member Keating, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Carlton, and Member Bartley certainly covered a lot of the points that were raised at our council, and I too was very pleased to see this report come forward. We recognize that it has been some time in the making, 22 months to be precise, and we're very glad to have had it in front of us. And speaking to the structure of it being approved at the council's first, that certainly was our understanding from our staff, that that was the correct procedure, and that it be received here for information purposes, allowing each council equal opportunity to have comment on the report. In terms of the public members, I'm very pleased about that, thinking of potential applicants that we know in Meaford who are really, really knowledgeable about the work of fire departments, who are possibly retired firefighters themselves, and I think they'll bring a tremendous amount of fire knowledge to this table and will be a real asset to this board. So again, I'm just very pleased with the report as it's been presented, and I want to thank all the members of staff who've been involved in putting this together over this last not quite 2 years.
Thank you. If there's no other comments, Member Bartley, go ahead.
I apologize. The 3%, it means that the board doesn't have to accept the 3% or 2.8. The board can say, no, we want it lower. The board can approve something lower before it goes back to the municipality. So it's creating a quicker process. So, as long as we have control of what we are handing out, I can go along with it.
Member Pringle, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought overall the budget or the proposal was really good. Concerning was the 3%, and I'm just reading the agreement permits the ITFD board to increase an annual budget by 3% each year. Any increase in excess of that will be subject to approval by both participating municipal councils. And again, that is given the green light to the 3%. So I'm not sure if there's a bit of verbiage to be changed in there a wee bit to change that 3%, because it does say automatic, it goes to 3%. Yeah, so it right off, anyway, that piece does kind of get to me a little bit. I'm in favor of having a couple of other folks on the board also to give a little more transparency to what we do here. Just to have them here, I don't think that's a real issue. But yeah, the concern for me is that 3%.
Member Keating, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. So I'm just curious to know, with that conversation, what the procedure might be now that this has been approved by both of our councils. Can this board provide a recommendation for an amendment? Yes, thank you. I would just like to know how that, if that was possible.
If I may briefly, Chair Colton, just before the Treasurer answers that question. So just for clarity, the Council of Georgian Plus has not approved this agreement. They have only received it at this point in time at committee level. It has not been endorsed by Council.
So that would bring about a question. Has Meaford approved it already? Or does it have to come back for a bylaw to be passed? Go ahead, Member Keating. I'm on the same with that 3%. To me, this reads, if Fire Board has the authority pursuant to this agreement to increase the ITFD budget by 3% annually. Doesn't say up to 3%, it says by 3% annually, if the Fire Board deems appropriate. But I'll make a comparison to Library Board. Our agreement with the North Grey Union Public Library Board reads the same way, and we can guarantee they're coming in at that 3% every year. So I have concerns there that in difficult times, we can't control our Fire Board budget. We know it's going to come in at 3%. And I think, is there a different way to word that so that it reflects what Member Bartley said, where it's up to 3% annually rather than just by 3% annually?
So through your chair, we can recommend that change. And again, it's just one word. It is the responsibility of this board to set the budget each year. So as Member Bartley said, it is within the board's control what they are recommending. If it's 2, maybe some years it needs to be 4 or 5, but we can change that wording to be up to 3% annually.
Okay, is everyone on the board okay with that minor little change? The only other change that I had brought forward had to do with membership on the board, and it reflected how many people would sit on the board with the public members. It didn't say who was voting members, so I've asked to have that clarified as to just how many people are actually voting members on the committee or on the board. May seem silly, but we don't always know.
Yes, so through your chair, I have spoke to staff at Meaford, and we will be adding a 1 line in, just specifying that all members will be voting members.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion then? Member Bartley, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. One last issue. How do we start the process to elect the members at large? Do we, Meaford do theirs and Georgian Bluffs do theirs, or do we put it out together?
I see the acting CAO nodding his head, so turn it over to him.
Yes, so through you, Chair Carlton, I suspect, and I would perhaps suggest that the best way would be to follow the normal process that each council has for appointing members of public and public at large onto that committee process, and follow through that process. And I think it would be worth having a conversation as to aligning those in terms of timelines, so that we know when the new agreement will kick in with the new membership structure in place. Maybe we can establish that in time for the next but one board meeting, just so that there's alignment. We don't have one council having appointed its public member prior to the other one having it there at the board. But yeah, I would follow the internal committee process.
With a timeline is what Member Bartley is adding to that we're clear on when this is going to happen.
So in terms of timeline, through you, Chair Carlton, from a Georgian Bluffs perspective, we've had this now at committee. I believe it could be endorsed by council with those minor changes tomorrow, and then a bylaw brought forward as a result of that. I don't know what Meaford's timing would be. Are you in a summer recess at all, or?
And say, if I may, the staff member at Meaford told me July 24th is when the bylaw would be going.
So I believe the earliest that bylaw would be presented to Georgian Bluffs Council would be August 16th. And then the next scheduled board meeting would be no date, but what would it traditionally be?
Actually, it says here the board will meet again as scheduled on September 12th at 2. Yeah, it's in our package.
I would expect it would be difficult to have a citizen appointee for that September date, but we could aim for the one after that.
Through you, Chair, if I may. The timing may not work out because usually we would advertise committee applications for a 2 to 3 week period to allow members of the public who are interested to apply. And so I'm not sure that we would be able to make it happen for September. But again, if the board saw an urgency, you can call a special meeting.
So if it's not coming back through to Georgian Bluffs for the final bylaw reading until August 16th, we're not going to be able to start advertising for a member of the public to apply until that time. So we would be looking at later than that September 12th meeting, having somebody in place. Go ahead.
Chair Carlton, and perhaps staff know if there's anything critical coming up for that agenda, or could we move the September meeting to October?
Quite likely we could do that. So maybe instead of announcing that meeting as being scheduled September 12th at the end of the meeting, we'll define an October 10th date. Okay. So that will give time then to have members of the public in place. Okay. So before I call for the vote on the recommendation that's on the floor regarding this agreement, are we amending that? Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, just through your chair. I read the agreement today there. One question. Do you want the Schedule A and B are part of this document? Does that need to come before the final reading? So you want the Schedule A and B? Okay.
Schedule A and B are going to consist of
Response areas.
So we're amending this or reading it as amended or just exactly the way it is?
For you, Chair. The second paragraph does read that the board directs staff to provide any and all comments to both participating municipalities. So I think that covers it all.
Okay, that sounds good. Any further discussion from the board, or are we all ready to call the vote? Okay, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So moving on to 8.2.2, the second quarter financial report. The recommendation that the Intertownship Joint Board of Management receive the 2023 quarter two financial update for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Pringle? Member Winters? Is there any discussion, or Samantha, do you have any comments to make on this? Any discussion from the board? Member Keaveney, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chair Carlton. And perhaps I missed something in here, but on page 76, it speaks to second paragraph, operating contributions for January to June, and we'll be invoicing the new monthly rate going forward. What is the new monthly rate?
For your chair. So we had to adjust the monthly rate as we had been previously invoicing the same amount as the previous year. So now it will be $44,468 each month, with the catch-up invoice being $23,589.
Does that answer the question? Okay. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. There is no unfinished business, no new business. Board inquiries and comments. Does any member have anything to add? Seeing none, we have no closed session. And the date of the next regular meeting will be October 10th at 2 p.m. If there's no further business, I will now call for adjournment of this meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Oh, clerk is waving at me.
Through your chair. Actually, if we could we have a vote on just amending that rescheduling that date from September 12th to October 10th, just for clarity's sake, because that date has already been advertised. So I just want it to reflect in the minutes that the board has approved the change in date.
So read that as a recommendation and we vote on it then, is what you're asking? Okay, so the board will meet again as scheduled on October 10th at 2 p.m. There's no further, oh, so we need to vote on that. Skip the rest of that sentence. Okay, so if everyone is in favor of that, then we can just do it on a show of hands there. Everyone's in favor? Perfect, thank you. Okay. Now I'll call for an adjournment of the meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Member Bartley and Member Pringle, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. We are now adjourned.